Greetings from Arab Center, Washington, D.C. This is Khalil Jahshan, Executive Director of Arab Center, Washington, welcoming you to another video, part of our expert interview series. And we're delighted today to host Jessica Montell, a good friend, a well-known person focusing on human rights in the region. So those of you who are interested in this issue, I'm sure are already familiar with Jessica and her background. She's been well known throughout the region and the world with regards to her activism for at least 2 decades, 2+ decades actually. And so we're delighted to have her here. We're in Washington. It's a gloomy, cloudy, rainy day, quite similar to the forecast in the region and in the aftermath of the Israeli elections and the future of human rights in the region and the end to occupation and the realization of Palestinian rights. So we're looking forward to discuss these issues with our special guest, Jessica Montell. Jessica, of course, is the Executive Director of HaMoked. HaMoked is the Center for the Defense of the Individual. We'll talk about it for some of you who are not necessarily well-versed in the alphabet soup of civil rights and human rights organizations in Israel and the Middle East in general. But she's been with them for 5+ years, and now she's the Executive Director. Basically, we're going to ask Jessica to tell us a little bit about HaMoked when we start, but essentially it is an Israeli human rights NGO, non-governmental organization that assists the Palestinians, particularly those living under Israeli occupation in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza, to kind of be able to cope, deal, resist, and live normally, if you will, by protecting their rights under occupation. So it's a difficult job under difficult circumstances, and those of us who observe events in the region appreciate the hard work that Jessica and her colleagues have been doing on this. So let's go ahead and begin essentially with the basic question. Let's talk about Jessica first. Jessica, you are a U.S. citizen, and you did immigrate to Israel. What prompted you to immigrate? And particularly, I'm very interested, I mean, we've known each other's activities and so on over the years. We've met before, once or twice. And but what prompted you to start a career in human rights, particularly Palestinian human rights, as a new immigrant from the States to Israel?
So first, thank you for having me here.
Pleasure.
I'm originally from Northern California, and I'm Jewish. And you know, Northern California is a very progressive activist community. I first came to Israel in high school, and I don't know if you know these trips that they bring American Jews to Israel. You see a very idyllic place. And you know, that was the Israel that I first encountered. You know, it's a light unto the nations and making the desert bloom, all of these cliches.
And as progressive as Northern California,
yes,
probably.
at least, if not more.
At least in that period.
So, I mean, honestly, when I realized that the reality was much more complicated, you know, for me, it was clear that living in Israel, you have to be working to make it closer to that ideal. And the occupation of the Palestinians, to my mind, is the #1 injustice of Israel. And it's, you know, imperative that we all try and end the occupation.
All right, let's move to HaMoked a bit. And you're currently the executive director of the organization, which is, I guess, spelled out as the Center for the Defense of the Individual.
Yes.
Who is that individual? Who are you helping?
Yes. So HaMoked is what is unique in the family of human rights organizations. HaMoked's focus is on individual assistance. So we are providing legal aid, paralegal assistance to Palestinians from the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the Gaza Strip. And it's interesting, the organization was founded almost 35 years ago. Yes. The initial focus was on victims of violence and detentions. And we are still addressing these issues, but over the years, a lot of the attention has shifted to what I would say is the bureaucracy, the permit bureaucracy of occupation. I mean, most people who hear about occupation, you see the very dramatic headline events of big military operations or arrests, but the experience for the majority of Palestinians, occupation is a military permit bureaucracy. You need a permit, you know, even to live in your own home, to travel almost anywhere.
What to plant, what to eat, how to travel.
So much of our work is confronting that permit bureaucracy, obtaining permits for Palestinians who need to access their land on the other side of the separation wall, who want to visit from the West Bank to visit family in Gaza, who want to travel abroad and discover that there is a travel ban imposed on them. They're not allowed to travel. All of these issues we are trying to resolve. First, just arguing with the military or the Ministry of Interior. We have a big project on Jerusalem residency rights to keep families in their homes in Jerusalem with the Jerusalem identity residency status. When we are not able to solve the problem at the administrative level, we are turning to the Israeli courts. So it's very challenging and frustrating. I tell you what is surprising to everyone. A majority of HaMoked's cases are resolved successfully, even with this growing trend of the Israeli courts becoming more and more hostile to human rights. I mean, if we lose at a lower court, you can appeal to a higher court. We keep, fighting. It can take a long time. I mean, to think you have to wage a battle for a year just so that a farmer can access his or her own land on the other side of the separation wall. But so far, I mean, we talk about what comes next. So far, we are successful in a majority of the cases.
Yeah. Let me probe this a bit more. You distinguished yourselves, practically speaking, those of us who know the record, and you just basically clearly stated that most of the cases you deal with have been successful. Is it the mission of HaMoked that allows you to be a little bit more successful than others? Or is it the modus operandi? Is it the behind the scene, the quiet approach with the specific agencies that you deal with, unlike the others that go public and in the media and what have you? What makes you a little bit more successful, as you just stated?
Well, many organizations are no longer engaging with Israeli authorities, with the Israeli courts, I mean, out of a sense of hopelessness. And it's true, we are not petitioning the court to dismantle settlements, to lift the siege on Gaza. This will not be, I mean, the courts are not an address for this level of human rights violations. But when you are talking about an individual family threatened with deportation from Jerusalem, or again, all of these permits on the individual cases, and I think partly it is the low profile approach that it is not always helpful. The Israeli public is not sympathetic on the whole to our issues. It's not helpful to have a lot of public attention, away from the public eye, to go to a judge on an issue that is clearly arbitrary and harmful.
Why is the Israeli public, I mean, I grew up in the 50s in Palestine and Israel, and there were so many kind of, at least people who were conscious of that there is another side. It looks to me like we have stepped away from that over the years. Why is the Israeli public today not concerned, not informed, not interested in what happens to the Palestinian side?
Yes, it's a paradox.
Is it the shift to the right? What happened?
There is more information available than ever before, right? We all have access with social media to see first-person accounts from Palestinians of the reality under occupation, and yet, as you said, Israelis are less well informed. So it's a kind of, let's say, willful ignorance that they choose not to know the reality for people who live just, a few miles down the road. And the rightward shift, I mean, the question is, what is the chicken and what is the egg in terms of this, this feeling among Israelis that we Israelis are the victims, actually, of this conflict, right? We are the victims of violence, although it is, so clearly that disproportionately it is Palestinians suffering from violence. So, I mean, I think this is the big question, both why this is the case and how it could possibly be turned around. I mean, it's enough to see the election results to understand the shift of the Israeli public further and further to the extreme right.
As a veteran human rights activist for more than 2 decades plus, you taught the subject, you actually did the work, you supervised the work. How do you feel after seeing the results of these elections? What's your kind of instinctive, let's say, reaction?
I mean, honestly, it's frightening.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Why?
not. It's not a surprise, but what this means for the future of all of us who live. You know, I live in Jerusalem with my family, kids. For the Palestinians, it clearly means more. You know, a harsher iron fist, let's say, in terms of the treatment of the security forces of all of the government toward the Palestinians. That will mean more violence for all of us. But also we see, you know, they have already stated their intention to be attacking human rights organizations.
Targeting specifically, yes.
Which they have already said is an existential threat, that we have to view human rights defenders.
So you're not Smotrich's favorite person.
I mean, we are prepared, and we have had difficult, you know, of course, we have seen, you know, horrible violence, suffering, also already attacks on human rights organizations. On the one hand, we are, you know, prepared, but it is a very, honestly, demoralizing situation right now.
You know, when these people like that are supposed to be partners in the coalition, once it's declared, I mean, they are negotiating right now their specific role, like the Ben Gvirs of this world, the Smotrich of this world, the Maozes of this world. I hear this term that is mind-boggling, emphasis on like a new Jewish identity, new Jewish character. What does that mean to you as a progressive Jew?
I mean, but honestly, that is not an attack on the Palestinians.
That's
an attack on
yeah.
all of us who don't think, you know, that Jewish identity and Judaism is, you know, their interpretation of it. This very narrow, fundamentalist,
I'm sure they're not
repressive.
seeking to get a Palestinian Israeli citizen to wear a yarmulke. I mean,
no, but I mean, all sorts of issues of gender segregation,
yes.
Restrictions and repression against LGBT Israelis, you know, attacks on the Reform Jewish, the idea that anyone would have any alternative way of practicing Judaism beyond what their rabbis dictate. So, I mean, the number one target for this government will definitely be the Palestinians. Human rights defenders will also be targeted, but any, you know, secular, liberal Jews also should be concerned.
Are on the other side of the track. In looking basically at the background of HaMoked, the registration forms are often quoted that HaMoked filed with the Israeli registrar for non-profit organizations as a Amuta, right? And it describes the mission of the organization as to provide assistance to persons who have fallen victims to acts of violence, abuse and or deprivation of basic rights by governmental authorities. And you do it pro bono, am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so there is no charge to that. But how do you choose your cases?
So we are open to, I mean, we have defined certain issues that we provide assistance. If your child is arrested and you don't know where he is being held, you call HaMoked through a series of legal proceedings and battles. The military must inform us within 24 hours where a Palestinian is being held. On what basis?
Freedom of information? Or?
We have a power of attorney from, I mean, in fact,
from the family?
But the military they have the legal obligation to inform. If you arrest somebody, they should, of their own initiative, inform the family where the person is being held. So they agree they have that obligation, and then the compromise was anyone that turns to HaMoked, they tell us within 24 hours.
Does that include administrative detainees that let you know?
Yes,
where
they
they
tell
are?
us physically where they are being held, and then we can tell the families. So, I mean, it is open to anyone who wants to call us. Also, humanitarian access to Gaza. If you want to visit a family member in Gaza, the military has very restrictive criteria, but if you meet those criteria, a wedding, a funeral, to visit a sick relative in Gaza, we will provide assistance. So we don't restrict. I mean, we have restricted the areas that we can help you with. Access to land beyond the separation wall. Anyone who has land beyond the separation wall and needs our assistance, we will help them. Contesting travel bans, people who get to Allenby Bridge to travel abroad and they are prevented from leaving, we will contest the travel ban. So we don't, pre-select. We are open to the entire Palestinian population in these specific areas where we think we can help.
I am very intrigued personally, I mean, having lived there, about access, about communication. How do you communicate with your clients, those cases you adopt? Do you have the freedom to actually go in and out and see them, particularly those who are political kind of prisoners under restricted
I mean,
situation?
first, how we have to inform the Palestinian public of our services. I mean, it used to be much more word of mouth, but now with social media, so you can do outreach to different communities so that people know the services that we offer, but also if we have an important achievement in the court that then benefits families or certain populations, we want to make sure that everyone knows. Our attorneys can visit prisoners in prisons, I mean administrative detainees and others that you have access. We are not able to get into Gaza, though. A lot of the work has to be then fax and WhatsApp and telephone, that we are exchanging documents back and forth, even a power of attorney, so that we can represent people in Gaza when they cannot get out and we cannot go in.
Do you have complete access, let's say, to prisoners knowing the Israeli security system? I know you work a lot with the Israeli prison authorities, right? Do they allow you free access to security-related cases?
During an interrogation, when the Palestinian, if you're under interrogation by the Shabak, the Israel Security Agency, then no. There is a ban on meeting the prisoner during interrogation. But after the interrogation, a lawyer has the right to visit all the prisoners, security detainees and prisoners, children, administrative detainees. So anyone who wants to complain about prison conditions or has been denied visits or any other wants to complain about violence, we can visit them.
So you do have a legal team, lawyers on your staff?
Yes.
And your staff, if I'm not mistaken, is bilingual and binational, right?
Yes.
You have Arabs and Jews,
Yes,
correct?
we are about half-half, Israeli citizens, Jewish and Palestinian, and East Jerusalemite Palestinians as well.
No West Bankers?
No West Bankers that are able to come to the office.
To be able to perform these tasks?
Yes.
In an acceptable way?
In a, access, yes. For everyone, access is the concern.
You have something that caught my attention. It's interesting, a function within HaMoked. It's called the Emergency Human Rights Hotline. What is that for?
All of the issues, if you have a checkpoint set up, if suddenly your village is blocked off and people need to get to emergency medical services, or during the olive harvest, suddenly they, the gates are closed, then you can call our office, and then we try and either directly calling a lot of arguments with the different officials within the military, and then if it is something urgent, we can file an urgent petition to the court as well.
My understanding is based on these functions that are part of your program and activities, you have to deal with COGAT a lot.
Yes.
Now, in the negotiations taking place to form the government, I hear rumors that some of the powers of COGAT might be transferred to satisfy some of the demands from the extremists and the Netanyahu coalition that's emerging, are asking for transferring some of these powers from the military, which is probably, it might be difficult to comprehend as an American, but might be easier to do than moving the stuff now to Treasury, so that they can control that. How will that impact your work?
Yes, I mean, I hear the same rumors that Bezalel Smotrich, who wanted to be Minister of Defense, maybe that's a bridge too far, so now they are offering, but I mean, it's only from the, what is reported in the press, that he would take the finance ministry instead, but he wants to be in charge of the civil administration, the military office responsible for civilian matters in the West Bank. I mean, it's really, giving the, what is the expression? Giving the cat to watch over the...
the fox to guard the hen house.
Yes, I mean, to think, I mean, this is the office both responsible for settlements, right? So he wants illegal outposts to then be approved or to be expanding, giving, who gives building permits to settlements? It's Kogat, the civil administration, but also all of the dealings with Palestinians. I mean, all of the permit regime for Palestinians. They are the governing, basically the government of the Palestinians is this Israeli military office.
Let's dissect a bit the mission of HaMoked. You mentioned a little while ago the different components. One of them was freedom of movement. What aspect of freedom of movement? Why do you get involved in that? What's the issue? What are the problems?
So many things in Washington we take for granted. I mean, to wake up in the morning and drive to work or school or to visit, anyone. Palestinians need a permit for this. Within the occupied territories or in and out. Between the West Bank and Gaza, access to lands, travel abroad. So it is very fundamental and something that Palestinians can't take for granted. And then we are trying to help as much as possible.
Particularly for a state that claims to be the oasis of democracy in the region, isn't it? I mean, how do you reconcile being a democracy and restricting your people, citizens?
But it's, of course, not their citizens, right? Yeah. I mean, this is really the paradox of Israel, that you can live in Tel Aviv, or even I live in West Jerusalem. We feel like a liberal democracy, comparable to the United States. Of course, we take all of these rights and freedoms for granted, and then East Jerusalem Palestinians, West Bank, and even more so Gaza, they cannot take any of that for granted.
I remember growing up, and I did have Israeli citizenship, and we had to have, in the old days, permits to go take a test in Haifa, permits to go to work in Jaffa, permits to go, for everything.
When inside Israel, Palestinians were under military rule.
Yeah.
Yes.
And another point is the foreign travel ban. Is that still prevalent? I mean,
for Palestinians to travel abroad?
Right.
Yes. So we submitted a Freedom of Information request last year. At any given time, about 10,000 Palestinians have a travel ban. I mean, maybe some don't even know, right? And
that's both West Bank and Gaza, or mostly
this is
West Bank?
This is only West Bank.
West Bank. So I assume a lot, probably the whole Gaza population.
Gaza, it's the default is that you are not allowed to travel.
How about local travel? Like families are divided. Patients need to come for treatment. Gaza, West Bank.
Gaza, West Bank, and East Jerusalem. And, the major hospitals, the most advanced
in
medical care
Correct.
in East Jerusalem. So everybody would need a permit also to come to those hospitals. I mean, even the medical staff, doctors who are in the West Bank that need to come to the hospital, but also the patients, family members to accompany. So, yes, freedom of movement.
Well, that's another area we should probably raise with our administration that brags about 100 million distributed to the network of hospitals in Jerusalem. If there is no access to these hospitals, we can send billions, not just millions.
Right. I mean, access both for the staff and the patients. Yes.
Checkpoints and roadblocks. A lot of them. I don't know what the number is these days. Less or more than what it used to be. But it really paralyzes life. I mean, having to go through a couple of roadblocks coming to work from Fairfax, Virginia to Washington, D.C. Would impact my life a lot.
Yes. I mean, Amira Haas talks about the occupation of Palestinians' time.
Yes.
Just the fact, I mean, even if you make it to work, right? But you don't know, is it going to be half an hour or it's going to be 3 hours, right? You spend the whole day trying to get a permit for something that is to travel within the West Bank even, that you might need the permits. So, I mean, just the fact that life is so uncertain, you can't ever take for granted that you get in your car to travel and that you know that you will get there without any problems.
Yeah. Let's spend just a couple of minutes and conclude with administrative detention. You've worked on that for a long time. You've written about that. You've lectured about that. And as a matter of fact, I dug up an article you wrote 22 years ago in the Jerusalem Post, question about administrative detention, questioning, saying basically, or calling for time for a new deal for administrative detainees, asking the government at least to stop renewing it arbitrarily. Are we still in the same boat? How many people are under
administration? I mean, it's terrible to think 20 years later
and nothing changed.
I mean, the opposite now. The situation this past year, we get once a month, the first of the month, the number of Palestinians held in administrative detention. Since the beginning of the year, it is going up and up and up. It's now 820. I mean, this was from the 1st of November. 820 Palestinians in administrative detention. It's the highest number in 15 years, but maybe for people who don't know, this is a detention with no charge and no trial. It should be a preventive, right? Not because you've committed a crime, but because they expect that you are a future danger. It's entirely based on secret evidence. So the detainee does not know
what the charges are,
what the allegations are. There is no way to refute them. You can be held for 6 months, but then this can be renewed indefinitely.
And no due process in American terminology, right?
Right. So, I mean, this is a big concern. It's, a majority are men, but also women, also children. You have now 6 children in administrative detention. So it's really, a categorical case of violation of human rights. If people are suspected of wrongdoing, you can put them on trial. They have to have a fair trial, but otherwise you have to release. There's no justification for what is an assembly line of detention without trial.
And we know that administrative detention happens around the world. I mean, several countries do that, but it's supposed to be rare and it's supposed to be in extreme cases of national security.
The most exceptional case, you could hold somebody for a few days to prevent a grave danger. But here, again, it's an assembly line.
It's a normal daily process.
Yes, of hundreds of people.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much. We could talk for hours about your work and the great accomplishments you've had. We thank you for all your efforts. We express our appreciation to your staff and to the organization for doing that, and pro bono, essentially serving the cause of human rights universally. So we appreciate your visit here. We wish you a successful visit to Washington, D.C., and hope to see you in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching this. I hope it's been informative about the situation of human rights in Israel, particularly pertaining to Palestinians under occupation. We'll see you in a future interview.